I did it all to stand here today, Jasmine Carter Langley declares, her voice steady as she faces her ex, Henry Sterling, and his fiancée at the Urban Business Summit, her triplets by her side, in a moment that flips their world upside down. Hey there, where are you tuning in from? And what's the vibe where you are? Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories of grit and triumph, and drop your location in the comments. Let's see how far this tale travels. Can you guess how a single mom from Chicago's South Side turned betrayal into a $2 billion empire? What secrets did she uncover to outsmart the man who called her never enough? Get ready for a journey of revenge, redemption, and raw ambition that'll leave you speechless. Stick with us to find out how Jasmine rewrote her destiny. The fluorescent lights of the executive bathroom on the 35th floor of Sterling Financial Group's Boston headquarters cast a sterile glow over Jasmine Carter's trembling hands. She stood frozen, her reflection in the polished mirror barely recognizable. A woman on the edge of a life-altering precipice. At 28, Jasmine was a vision of poise and ambition, her deep brown eyes sharp with the intellect that had carried her from Chicago's South Side to this gleaming tower in the city's financial district. Her tailored Chanel blazer, a gift from her lover, clung to her frame, a symbol of the world she'd fought to enter. In her hand, the third pregnancy test confirmed what the first two had whispered. She was carrying triplets. The weight of the discovery pressed against her chest, a mix of wonder and dread. She, a Howard University honors graduate who'd grown up in a cramped apartment with her single mother, Evelyn, a schoolteacher, was about to become a mother to three. Jasmine slipped the test into her purse, her fingers brushing the cool leather as she steadied herself. No one would guess her secret yet, not her colleagues who envied her meteoric rise as a senior analyst, nor Henry Sterling, the man who'd swept her into his world. Henry 32 was the golden-haired heir to Sterling Financial Group, a financial empire built by his grandfather. With his Harvard pedigree and piercing blue eyes, he was Boston's untouchable prince, his calculated charm unlocking every door in a city that worshipped lineage and wealth. Their romance had begun in whispers, a corporate secret born during late-night strategy sessions. Jasmine's data-driven presentation at a quarterly review had caught his eye, her insights on European market trends sparking something more than professional interest. "Ms. Carter," he'd said, lingering after the room emptied, his voice low, "your perspective is refreshing." The way his gaze held hers, bold and unapologetic, had sent a thrill through her, despite her better judgment. For 2 years, their relationship had bloomed. Henry had claimed her publicly, moving her into his Back Bay penthouse with its sprawling views of the Charles River. Colleagues whispered about her luck, calling her the woman who'd snagged Boston's most eligible bachelor. To Jasmine, it felt like she'd finally grasped the American dream, a seat at the table, a love that defied the odds. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed her straightened hair, and stepped back into the bustling office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The day dragged on, her mind racing as she crunched numbers for the quarterly projections, each keystroke a battle to focus. By evening, she was home, the penthouse's Italian marble table set with a meal she'd prepared, roasted lamb, rosemary scented, a labor of love for the man she thought she knew. Henry arrived late, his Armani suit slightly rumpled, his attention glued to his MacBook. Jasmine took a deep breath, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "Henry," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside, "I'm pregnant, with triplets." The words hung in the air, heavy and expectant. Henry's fingers froze on the keyboard. He looked up, his face draining of its usual charisma, replaced by a cold, unreadable mask. "Are you sure they're mine?" The question hit like a physical blow, sharp and cruel. Jasmine's breath caught, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "How can you even ask that?" she managed, her voice trembling with disbelief. Henry closed his laptop with a deliberate snap, his blue eyes narrowing. "This isn't the time, Jasmine. We're launching a European expansion. The board's watching my every move. Triplets? With you?" His words dripped with disdain, each one a shard of glass. "My family, the investors, they'd never accept it." "It's not 1960, Henry," she shot back, her voice rising. It's now. We're together. This is our future. He leaned back, his expression hardening into something unrecognizable. You're naive. A black woman from the South Side with 3 mixed-race kids? You drag my reputation through the mud. You'd be a liability at every gala, every board meeting. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a checkbook, his movements precise, almost mechanical. $500,000, enough for a fresh start, somewhere far from Boston, far from me. Jasmine's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. You're paying me to disappear? Her voice was a whisper, laced with betrayal. I'm giving you a chance to be realistic, Henry said, his tone devoid of warmth. He scribbled the amount, tore the check free, and slid it across the table. You were never enough for my world, Jasmine. You'll never fit in the circles I run in. Do us both a favor and leave. The words pierced her like ice, each syllable a confirmation of her deepest fears. 2 years of love, of shared dreams and whispered promises, unraveled in an instant. She stared at the check, its stark black ink a mockery of everything she'd believed they had. This is our home, she said, her voice breaking. We've lived here together for a year. My name's on the lease, Henry replied, standing and grabbing his coat. My furniture, my address. I had your things packed and moved to storage. Sullivan from HR is expecting your resignation by tomorrow. I don't need distractions during this expansion. He paused at the door, not meeting her eyes. Be gone by morning. The door clicked shut, leaving Jasmine alone in the cavernous penthouse, the uneaten meal growing cold. The check lay on the table, a silent accusation. She clutched it, her fingers crumpling the edges, but she couldn't bring herself to tear it. Not yet. The man she'd loved, the man she'd trusted, had reduced her to a problem to be solved, a stain to be erased. Her reflection in the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman on the brink, not of defeat, but of something fiercer. As the city lights glittered below, Jasmine's resolve hardened. She wouldn't let Henry's words define her. She would fight, not just for herself, but for the 3 lives growing inside her. The world that deemed her never enough would soon learn how wrong it was. The air at Boston's South Station was thick with the scent of stale coffee and diesel, a gritty assault on Jasmine Carter's senses as she curled up on a hard wooden bench. Her coat draped over her swollen belly like a shield. Her world had collapsed in a single night, and now at 28, pregnant with triplets, she was homeless. The $500,000 check from Henry Sterling burned in her purse, untouched, a symbol of betrayal she refused to cash. Her corporate cards were dead, her work email deactivated, and her key to Henry's Back Bay penthouse useless. The life she'd built at Sterling Financial Group, years of late nights, meticulous reports, and accolades, had been erased with the cold efficiency of a corporate guillotine. Her phone, once buzzing with messages from colleagues and friends, now sat silent, as if Henry's influence had severed every connection she'd forged in Boston. With only $312 in her bank account, Jasmine faced a void that threatened to swallow her whole. The station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face as she clutched her single suitcase, a battered relic of her college days. Each passing hour etched her reality deeper, jobless, abandoned, and carrying 3 lives that depended on her alone. The clatter of footsteps and distant train announcements filled the air, but Jasmine felt invisible, her presence reduced to a fleeting curiosity for strangers who averted their eyes. A woman with a swollen belly, sleeping on a bench, was a story no one wanted to read. Hunger gnawed at her, but she rationed her last $20, buying a stale bagel and a bottle of water from a vendor who looked at her with pity. She forced down bites, each one a reminder of the lavish dinners she'd once shared with Henry, now replaced by this cold public purgatory. Sleep was fleeting, interrupted by the ache in her back and the restless kicks of the triplets inside her. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering, "We're going to be okay," though the words felt hollow. The station's benches were her bed for 3 nights, each one colder and more disorienting than the last. She washed her face in the public bathroom, the mirror reflecting a woman she barely recognized. Eyes shadowed with exhaustion, lips pressed tight with determination. Her Burberry blazer, a gift from Henry, hung loosely over her frame, a cruel reminder of the life she'd lost. She avoided her reflection's gaze, focusing instead on the practical. Survival. But survival in Boston, a city that had once seemed to promise everything, was now a labyrinth of closed doors. On the third night, as a janitor swept nearby, his broom scraping against the floor, Jasmine's resolve cracked. Tears welled hot and unstoppable as she thought of her mother, Evelyn, back in Chicago. Evelyn, with her arthritis-riddled hands and unwavering love, had raised Jasmine alone in a Southside apartment, sacrificing her own dreams to give her daughter a chance. Jasmine had promised to repay that sacrifice, to lift them both into a better life. Instead, she was here, broken and adrift. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number she knew by heart. "Mom," she said, her voice fracturing, "I need to come home." Evelyn's voice, warm and steady despite the late hour, flooded through the line like a lifeline. "Your room's waiting, baby. Come to Chicago." Jasmine swallowed a sob, pride and pain tangling in her throat. "I'll explain everything when I get there," she managed. At the ticket counter, she counted out $67 for a one-way bus ticket, her hands shaking as the cashier glanced at her belly and quickly looked away. The pity in his eyes stung, but Jasmine was growing accustomed to it, a silent judgment that followed her everywhere. The bus ride was a blur of discomfort, the narrow seats pressing against her expanding body. Each jolt sent waves of nausea through her, the triplets' movements a constant reminder of the future she had to fight for. When the bus pulled into Chicago's Port Authority, Jasmine struggled with her suitcase, its weight a metaphor for the burdens she carried. The subway ride to the South Side was a descent into familiarity, each stop a step back to the life she'd fought to escape. Climbing the stairs to Evelyn's fifth-floor walk-up, her legs burned, her breath short. Before she could knock, the door swung open, and Evelyn stood there, her teacher's cardigan slightly frayed, her eyes lined with exhaustion but brimming with love. Without a word, she pulled Jasmine into a fierce embrace, her arthritic hands surprisingly strong. "My baby," Evelyn whispered, stepping back to see Jasmine's swollen belly. "Oh, Lord, triplets?" Jasmine nodded, tears breaking free. "And I'm doing it alone, Mom." That night in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded posters of Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison, Jasmine lay under the weight of her new reality. The thin walls carried Evelyn's muffled cough, a reminder of her mother's worsening arthritis, and the prescription bottles lining the kitchen counter. "I'm supposed to be taking care of you," Jasmine whispered to the darkness, guilt clawing at her. She dreamed of giving Evelyn a life of ease, not returning as a burden. The room felt smaller than she remembered, its walls closing in with the weight of her failures. She traced the outline of her belly, feeling the faint kicks of her sons, and vowed they would know a different life, one where they were never deemed not enough. Morning brought harsh clarity. At the kitchen table, Jasmine scribbled numbers on a worn notepad. $10600 rent, $300 utilities, at least $700 for food to sustain herself, Evelyn, and soon 3 infants. Medical costs for a high-risk pregnancy loomed like a storm cloud, potentially catastrophic without corporate insurance. Evelyn set a cup of peppermint tea before her, its steam curling in the dim light. "We'll manage, baby," she said, her voice firm despite the pain in her joints. "We always have." "I need a job," Jasmine replied, opening her laptop. "A good one." She began tailoring resumes, emphasizing her Howard degree, her analytical prowess, her marketing expertise, carefully omitting her pregnancy. The local cyber cafe, where she paid $5 an hour for internet access, became her refuge, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she applied to 92 companies in 2 weeks. Each rejection email was a fresh wound, the few responses offering salaries too low to support a family of 5. "What about Sterling Financial?" Evelyn asked one evening, her voice tentative. "Don't they have a Chicago office?" Jasmine's face hardened. "I can't go back there. Henry would make sure I'm never hired." She didn't tell Evelyn about the check, still crumpled in her purse, or Henry's cruel dismissal of her and their unborn children. The shame was too raw, the betrayal too deep. She pushed forward, her exhaustion a constant companion, her body a vessel for both her children and her resolve. The South Station benches had stripped her of illusions, but they hadn't broken her. In the quiet of Evelyn's apartment, with the city's hum filtering through the cracked window, Jasmine clung to a single truth. She would rise, not for Henry's approval, but for the 3 lives she carried and the mother who'd never abandoned her. The dim glow of the laptop screen illuminated Jasmine Carter's face, casting shadows across the cramped kitchen of her mother's Southside apartment. The hour was late, the Chicago night humming with distant sirens and the occasional creak of the old building settling. Jasmine sat at the worn Formica table, her swollen belly pressing against the edge, the triplets inside her restless with faint kicks that mirrored her unease. Her mother, Evelyn, slept in the next room, her labored breathing a reminder of the arthritis that plagued her. The weight of their reality, $600 rent, mounting medical bills, and only $312 left in her account, pressed down like a physical force. Jasmine's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears. She was 6 months pregnant, her body a battlefield of nausea and fatigue, yet surrender was not an option. She had come home to Chicago broken, but she refused to stay that way. The laptop pinged with a news alert, a cruel interruption to her job search. The headline sliced through her. Henry Sterling engaged to Abigail Wentworth, heiress to Wentworth Media. Jasmine's breath caught, her heart lurching as she clicked the link. The screen filled with a glossy photo of Henry, his golden hair impeccable, his arm wrapped possessively around a willowy blonde, whose diamond rings sparkled like a taunt. Abigail Wentworth, with her porcelain skin and old money pedigree, stood on the steps of a Hamptons estate, both of them smiling as if they had invented joy. The caption promised a society wedding that would dominate Boston's elite circles. Jasmine stared at Henry's hand on Abigail's waist, the same hand that had written the $500,000 check to erase her from his life, the same hand that had once traced her skin with promises of forever. The betrayal, still raw, ignited something fiercer than pain, defiance. She slammed the laptop shut, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. "Never enough," she whispered, echoing Henry's cruel words. The phrase had haunted her since that night in his penthouse, a wound that refused to heal, but now it has transformed into fuel. Jasmine opened a new document, her fingers trembling not with fear, but with purpose. She typed Trinity Analytics business plan. In bold, the title a declaration of war against the man who deemed her unworthy. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to herself, to her unborn sons, to the world, that she was more than enough. She would build an empire, a legacy that would outshine Henry's inherited wealth and rewrite the narrative he'd tried to impose on her life. The plan poured out of her, each keystroke a rebellion. Trinity Analytics would fuse digital marketing, data analytics, and consumer behavior prediction, leveraging her expertise from Sterling Financial Group. She envisioned a proprietary algorithm that could analyze emotional triggers and purchasing patterns with unmatched precision, targeting audiences that traditional firms overlooked. Her fingers flew, outlining services, financial projections, and a 5-year roadmap to dominate the industry. The triplets kicked harder, as if cheering her on, their movements grounding her in the stakes of this fight. She paused only to sip cold tea, the peppermint soothing her nausea, but not her rage. The kitchen, with its peeling wallpaper and flickering bulb, became her war room, a stark contrast to the marble-clad offices she'd once navigated with ease. By dawn, the document was complete, 20 pages of strategy, ambition, and defiance. Jasmine printed the executive summary and taped it to the refrigerator, its presence a beacon in the dim apartment. She grabbed a yellow sticky note and scrawled Henry's words, "You were never enough," in sharp, deliberate strokes. This she pinned beside her bed, where it would greet her each morning, not as a wound, but as a weapon. "I'll make you proud," she whispered, her hands cradling her belly where Isaiah, Noah, and Levi stirred. "And I'll show him just how wrong he was." The promise felt like a vow, binding her to a future she would forge with her own hands. Exhaustion tugged at her, but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. She reopened her laptop, scouring job listings at the cyber cafe later that day, her 5-an-hour internet access a lifeline to opportunity. The cafe's hum, clattering keyboards, murmured conversations faded as she tailored cover letters, each one a plea for a chance. But the responses were sparse, and the few interviews she secured ended in veiled rejections. With your condition, one hiring manager trailed off, his eyes flicking to her belly. We need someone who can travel, another said, shuffling papers to avoid her gaze. Jasmine stood tall, her portfolio clutched tightly, and thanked them with a dignity that belied her despair. 7 interviews, 7 rejections, all tied to the triplets she carried. The world seemed determined to echo Henry's verdict, but she refused to let it define her. Back at the apartment, Evelyn noticed the strain in her daughter's eyes. You're pushing too hard, she said, setting a plate of cornbread on the table. Her hands, knotted with arthritis, trembled slightly. You need to rest for them. She nodded toward Jasmine's belly. I can't, Mom, Jasmine replied, her voice low but fierce. Rest doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't build a future. She opened her laptop again, searching for freelance gigs, $50 website designs, $20 social media posts, anything to keep them afloat. The numbers on her notepad mocked her. One eye shut and $600 rent, $300 utilities, $700 for food, and medical costs looming like a tidal wave. Evelyn's teacher's salary was stretched thin, and Jasmine's meager savings were dwindling. But the business plan on the refrigerator was a reminder that she wasn't just fighting for survival, she was laying the foundation for something greater. As night fell, Jasmine sat alone, the sticky notes words glaring from the wall. She traced the letters with her finger, her resolve hardening. Henry's rejection had stripped her of everything but her will, and that was enough. She would turn his dismissal into her triumph, not for revenge, but for the 3 boys who deserved a world that saw their worth. The South Side apartment, with its cracked walls and flickering dreams, was no longer a cage. It was the birthplace of her defiance. Jasmine closed her eyes, the triplets' kicks a rhythm of hope, and whispered, We're going to change everything. In that moment, she wasn't just a pregnant woman with $312 to her name. She was the architect of a legacy that would one day shake the foundations of the empire that had cast her out. The sterile hum of Chicago General Hospital's maternity ward was a stark contrast to the chaos raging inside Jasmine Carter. She lay in a recovery room, her body aching from the emergency C-section that had brought her triplets, Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, into the world at just 35 weeks. The antiseptic air stung her lungs, but it was the emptiness in her core that hurt most, the space where her sons had lived for months now hollow. Through the haze of painkillers, she clutched 3 Polaroid photos, each capturing a tiny red-faced boy, their minuscule bodies entangled in tubes and wires. They were fighters, the nurses said, each weighing barely 4 pounds but breathing on their own. Jasmine traced their images, Henry Sterling's cheekbones, her own deep brown eyes, and felt a surge of love so fierce it threatened to break her. But love alone couldn't pay the $12,000 daily NICU bills piling up like a storm cloud over her already precarious life. Evelyn, her mother, sat by the bed, her arthritic hands folded tightly, her face a mask of strength, despite the worry etched in her eyes. They're beautiful, baby, she said, her voice soft but steady. Jasmine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The boys were miracles, but their arrival had thrust her into a new battle. She was jobless. Her receptionist position at the Chicago ad agency was lost when she couldn't return full-time after the premature delivery. Her savings, already dwindled to $312, were a cruel joke against the medical costs and the $1,600 rent on Evelyn's Southside apartment. The $500,000 check from Henry remained uncashed in her purse, a symbol of her refusal to let his dismissal define her. But as the hospital administrator's words echoed, $12,000 a day, out-of-pocket exposure significant. Jasmine felt the walls closing in. Discharged after 3 days, Jasmine returned to Evelyn's cramped apartment, the boys still in the NICU. The 5th-floor walk-up, with its peeling paint and flickering lights, felt suffocatingly small. Evelyn had secured second-hand bassinets through her school teacher connections, their faded fabric a stark reminder of their financial straits. Jasmine set them up in her childhood bedroom, the space barely accommodating the three tiny beds. Each night, she sat by the empty bassinets, her laptop open, refining the Trinity Analytics business plan she'd written in a blaze of defiance. The plan was her lifeline, a blueprint for a digital marketing empire that would secure her son's future. But it was a distant dream against the immediate reality of survival. She needed money. Now. Desperation drove her to contact Keith Langley, a former Sterling Financial client who'd always praised her analytical brilliance. Keith, now running Pure Vita, a health food startup, was her last hope. With Levi's Polaroid tucked into her pocket for courage, Jasmine dialed his number, her voice steady despite the exhaustion clawing at her. "Mr. Langley," she began, pacing the tiny kitchen, "I have a proposal to revolutionize your digital marketing. Your current ad spend is bleeding out, 60% wasted on low-conversion audiences. My algorithm can triple your ROI in 60 days. Keith's silence stretched, and Jasmine's heart pounded. "Send me the details," he finally said. "If it's as good as you claim, we'll talk." She emailed a tailored strategy, her fingers trembling as she hit send, knowing the $4,000 fee could cover rent and a fraction of the medical bills. The NICU became Jasmine's second home, her days a blur of hospital visits and late-night work. She sat by her son's incubators, their tiny chests rising and falling under the glow of monitors. "You're fighters," she whispered, slipping a hand through a porthole to touch Isaiah's miniature fingers. The neonatologist, Dr. Patel, was cautiously optimistic. "They're strong for 35 weekers," she said, "but they'll need at least 2 weeks here." Each visit was a knife's edge of hope and fear, the beeping machines a constant reminder of the stakes. Jasmine worked from the hospital's cafeteria, her laptop balanced among coffee cups, drafting freelance gigs, $50 website designs, $20 social media posts to keep them afloat. Sleep was a fleeting luxury, snatched in 20-minute naps between hospital runs and emails. Evelyn's presence was a quiet anchor. Despite her arthritis, she cooked simple meals, cornbread, collard greens, urging Jasmine to eat. "You can't fight for them if you don't take care of yourself," she said, her voice firm but tender. Jasmine nodded, forcing down bites, but her mind was on the numbers. $12,000 a day, $600 rent, $700 for food. The hospital offered a payment plan, but even that was a crushing burden. One evening, as Evelyn massaged her swollen hands, she asked, "What about Sterling's Chicago office? Could they help?" Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Henry's made sure I'm blacklisted there," she said, her voice low to hide the pain. She didn't mention the check or Henry's words. "You were never enough," and that fueled her every move. 2 weeks later, the boys were deemed strong enough to come home. Jasmine wheeled them into the apartment in their bassinets, their tiny faces scrunched against the world. The space felt impossibly small, the air thick with the weight of their needs. Feeding 3 newborns, changing diapers, soothing cries, it was a relentless cycle that left Jasmine dizzy. Yet she worked through it, her laptop open during midnight feedings, refining her pitch for Keith. His response came at 2 a.m., a lifeline in her inbox. "Your strategy's bold. Let's implement it. $4,000 as agreed." Relief flooded her, but it was fleeting. The payment covered rent and a sliver of the medical bills. But the NICU debt loomed like a specter. Jasmine's routine became a grueling marathon. Wake at 5 a.m. to feed the boys, help Evelyn prepare for her teaching shift, then work on freelance gigs from the kitchen table. The triplets' cries a constant soundtrack. She designed email campaigns for $100, wrote ad copy for $30, and each task was a brick in the foundation of Trinity Analytics. The yellow sticky note by her bed, "You were never enough," stared back, a perverse motivation. During a rare quiet moment, as Noah slept against her chest, Jasmine opened her business plan. The algorithm she envisioned could predict consumer behavior with 87% accuracy, a game changer for small businesses ignored by corporate giants. She sketched code snippets, her mind racing with possibilities, even as her body begged for rest. One night, as the boys finally slept in unison, a miracle, Jasmine stood by the window, Chicago's skyline a distant promise. The city that had raised her, tough and unyielding, now demanded she prove herself again. She touched the Polaroids in her pocket, her son's faces grounding her. "This is for you," she whispered, her voice fierce. The hospital bills, the cramped apartment, the rejections, they were obstacles, not endings. Henry's dismissal had stripped her bare, but it had also revealed her strength. In the quiet of that South Side night, Jasmine wasn't just a single mother with a mountain of debt. She was a warrior, forging a path for her sons, determined to turn her pain into power. The cramped kitchen of Evelyn Carter's South Side apartment buzzed with a frenetic energy, its peeling wallpaper and flickering bulb no match for the fire in Jasmine Carter's eyes. Her laptop, perched precariously among formula bottles and a stack of diapers, glowed with the draft of a digital marketing strategy that had just transformed Pure Vita, Keith Langley's health food startup. The results were staggering, an 87% spike in online sales in a single month, forcing Pure Vita to restock their signature kale protein bars twice in a week. Jasmine, now a mother to 3 newborn boys, Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, sat at the worn Formica table, her body aching from sleepless nights and the weight of $12,000 daily NICU bills still haunting her. The $4,000 fee from Keith had paid the rent and chipped away at the medical debt, but it was a drop in an ocean of need. Yet in that moment, as the triplets slept in their secondhand bassinets, Jasmine felt a spark of something new. Validation. Her algorithm worked, and it was only the beginning. Keith's voice crackled through the phone at 2 a.m., jolting Jasmine awake as she cradled Noah. "Jasmine, what the hell did you do?" he demanded, his tone a mix of awe and disbelief. Her heart sank, fearing a glitch. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice tight. "Problem? Our sales are up 87%. I've been in this game 15 years and never seen a spike like this." Relief flooded her, followed by a rush of pride. "I told you your ad spend was inefficient," she said, a smile creeping into her voice. "We're hitting the right customers now." Keith didn't hesitate. "I need a full digital marketing overhaul. Double your fee, $8,000. And I'm telling every business owner I know about you." The call ended, and Jasmine allowed herself a rare moment of joy, twirling in the tiny kitchen, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. This was it, the first brick in the empire she'd vowed to build for her sons. The next morning, disaster struck. While soothing a fussy Isaiah, Jasmine knocked over her coffee, soaking the printed analytics report she'd prepared for Keith. The papers, meticulously crafted between diaper changes, were ruined, ink bleeding into illegible smudges. Tears of frustration welled as she stared at the mess, the weight of motherhood and ambition crashing down. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Then her eyes caught the yellow sticky note taped to her laptop. "You were never enough." Henry Sterling's words, meant to crush her, now steeled her resolve. She placed Isaiah in his swing, reprinted the reports, and emailed them to Keith, her fingers trembling but determined. She would be enough. She had to be. Keith's endorsement was a game changer. Within days, 5 Chicago entrepreneurs reached out. Their small businesses, coffee roasters, boutique gyms, organic skincare lines, hungry for the results Pure Vita had seen. Jasmine registered Trinity Analytics, LLC, the name a nod to her 3 sons, and set up shop in Evelyn's kitchen, the space now a chaotic blend of startup and nursery. Toys were scattered among USB drives, and the triplets' cries punctuated her client calls. She needed help. Enter Malik Jones, a 24-year-old computer science graduate from DePaul University, whose coding skills were overshadowed by the bias he faced as a black man with locks. "Why hasn't anyone hired you?" Jasmine asked during his interview, scanning his impressive GitHub portfolio. Malik's rueful smile said it all. "Tech recruiters get nervous when they see me." "They're lost," Jasmine replied, offering him the job on the spot. "Refine my algorithm. The pay's not Google level, but there's equity if we make it." Malik's eyes lit up, and Trinity Analytics gained its first employee. The kitchen couldn't contain their growth. Jasmine found a 500-square-foot office in Inglewood, its water-stained ceiling and creaky windows, a far cry from Sterling Financial's polished suites, but it was hers. She furnished it with second-hand desks from a liquidation sale, carving out a corner for a playmat where the triplets rolled and babbled. The boys, barely 3 months old, were a constant presence, their bassinets tucked beside her desk. Clients marveled at her juggling act, pitching predictive analytics while soothing Levi's cries, but Jasmine saw no alternative. Her algorithm, which analyzed consumer behavior with 87% accuracy, was outperforming industry giants, delivering results for small businesses at a fraction of the cost. Her client roster grew to 15, each paying monthly retainers that slowly chipped away at the medical debt. The workload was brutal. Jasmine's days began at 5 a.m., feeding the boys and helping Evelyn prepare for her teaching shift. By 8, she was in the office, Malik coding beside her as they refined the algorithm, now dubbed emotional IQ. Client meetings stretched into evenings, and freelance gigs, $100 email campaigns, $50 website tweaks, filled the nights. Sleep came in fragments, stolen between feedings and deadlines. One night, when Isaiah spiked a fever, Jasmine worked from the ER, her laptop balanced on her knees as she finalized a pitch while nurses monitored her son. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, raised an eyebrow. "Work emergency?" she asked. "And a baby emergency," Jasmine replied, stroking Isaiah's flushed cheek. "I'm handling both." The doctor nodded, a flicker of respect in her gaze. Most would be falling apart. Jasmine's response was simple. Not an option. Her first big break came when Keith invited her to present at a Chicago business networking event. In a budget blazer that barely fit her post-pregnancy frame, Jasmine stood before 30 entrepreneurs, her voice steady as she explained how emotional IQ had transformed Pure Vita. "She's a game changer," Keith told the room. "Whatever she charges, it's worth double." 5 new clients signed on that night, their retainers pushing Trinity Analytics revenue past $20,000 a month. For the first time, Jasmine glimpsed a future beyond survival. The office, with its leaky ceiling, became a symbol of possibility, its walls adorned with a framed LLC certificate and the yellow sticky note, "You were never enough." She hung it beside her desk, a reminder of the fire that drove her. As the boys approached 6 months, their personalities emerged. Isaiah's curiosity, Noah's calm, Levi's restless energy. Jasmine enrolled them in a subsidized daycare for a few hours daily, giving her time to focus. Malik's coding pushed her emotional IQ to new heights, predicting purchasing patterns with eerie precision. A skincare client reported a 120% sales increase. A gym doubled its memberships. Word spread, and Trinity Analytics became a quiet phenomenon in Chicago's small business scene. One evening, as Jasmine rocked Levi to sleep, her phone buzzed with a new inquiry, a restaurant chain seeking a national campaign. She stared at the email, her heart racing. This was no longer about paying bills. It was about building something that could rival the empire that had cast her out. In that Englewood office, surrounded by her son's laughter and the hum of possibility, Jasmine wasn't just surviving. She was rising, her defiance forging a legacy that would one day shake the foundations of Henry Sterling's world. The air in the Englewood office of Trinity Analytics crackled with possibility, the hum of ambition drowning out the creak of its worn floorboards. Jasmine Carter, now 29, sat at her second-hand desk, her eyes fixed on a laptop screen displaying the latest emotional IQ analytics dashboard. The algorithm, refined by her coder Malik Jones, had propelled Trinity Analytics to a roster of 15 clients, each small business transformed by her predictive marketing strategies. The office, a 500-square-foot haven with water-stained ceilings, was alive with the chaos of a startup in a makeshift nursery. Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, her 6-month-old triplets, babbled on a colorful playmat in the corner, their tiny hands grasping at toys as Jasmine prepared for a pivotal moment. A tech conference in Chicago's Loop had invited her to speak, her first chance to showcase emotional IQ to a broader audience. The stakes were high. Her $8,000 monthly revenue covered rent and chipped at the NICU debt, but Trinity needed a leap to become the empire she envisioned. Jasmine adjusted her budget blazer, its seams straining against her post-pregnancy frame, and rehearsed her presentation. The conference hall, a sleek glass and steel venue, buzzed with tech entrepreneurs and investors, their polished suits a stark contrast to her modest attire. As she took the stage, the spotlight burned, but she channeled her nerves into clarity. Traditional marketing wastes millions on guesswork, she began, her voice resonant. Emotional IQ predicts consumer behavior with 87% accuracy, doubling ROI for businesses ignored by corporate giants. The audience leaned forward, captivated by her data-driven passion. In the front row, a distinguished man in his late 50s, his silver hair framing sharp gray eyes, scribbled notes with intense focus. His face tugged at a memory, but Jasmine pushed it aside, her words flowing like a river breaking free. After her talk, as attendees swirled around coffee stations, the man approached. "Ms. Carter, remarkable presentation," he said, extending a hand. "Keith Langley, Langley Ventures." The name hit like a thunderbolt. Keith, a billionaire investor and Henry Sterling's former mentor, was a legend in tech and finance. His empire built from a Detroit auto shop to a $4 billion conglomerate. Jasmine's pulse quickened. Keith had praised her work at Sterling Financial Group, but his connection to Henry raised her guard. "Thank you, Mr. Langley," she replied, her handshake firm but cautious. "Your approach is revolutionary," he continued, his gaze assessing yet warm. "I'd like to see the real platform, not a polished pitch. Dinner tomorrow?" Suspicion flared. Why her? Was this Henry's shadow reaching out? But the opportunity was too big to ignore. "A cafe in Pilsen," she countered, choosing neutral ground over his upscale restaurant suggestion. Keith's smile was knowing. Smart, neutral territory it is. That night in the quiet of Evelyn's apartment, Jasmine researched Keith, the boys asleep in their bassinets. Articles detailed his rise from working-class roots, his mentorship of Henry, and his abrupt exit from Sterling Financial's board over ethical disagreements. Her stomach churned. Did he know about her past? The $500,000 check she'd never cashed? She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the demo she'd show him. The next day, at a cozy Pilsen cafe, the scent of fresh empanadas mingling with coffee, Jasmine opened her laptop. "This is emotional IQ," she said, navigating the interface with precision. "It aggregates behavioral data, identifies emotional triggers, and predicts conversions with tailored messaging." For an hour, she demonstrated its impact. 120% sales growth for a skincare client, doubled memberships for a gym. Keith's questions were incisive, his nods sparing but genuine. "This is beyond Google's reach," he said finally, leaning back. "It's artificial intelligence meets human psychology." Jasmine waited, her heart pounding. Then Keith dropped the bomb. "I want to invest $50 million for 15% equity." The number struck like lightning, valuing Trinity Analytics at over $330 million, a company born in a Southside kitchen. "I retain control," she said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Absolutely," Keith replied, his eyes crinkling. "I invest in people first, ideas second. You, Ms. Carter, are extraordinary." Her mind reeled. $50 million could erase the NICU debt, secure a real office, and hire talent. But Keith's ties to Henry lingered like a shadow. "Why me?" she asked, her tone direct. "You back established firms or cutting-edge startups? We're neither." Keith's smile was candid. "You will be. And I left Sterling's board because of men like Henry. My interest is in your vision, not his failures." A week later, in a sleek conference room at Langley Ventures' downtown headquarters, Jasmine signed the papers, surrounded by lawyers in the weight of her decision. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced as cameras flashed, capturing the moment Trinity Analytics stepped into the big leagues. That evening, she called Evelyn, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Mom, we're millionaires." Evelyn's joyful tears echoed through the phone, a sound sweeter than any contract. Later, as Jasmine sat on the apartment floor with the boys, she showed them the signed agreement. "This means a new home, babies," she said, her eyes misting. "With a yard," Isaiah babbled, his tiny hand grasping hers. "Yes, with a yard," she promised, the weight of their future lighter for the first time. Keith's investment opened doors that had been previously shut. He suggested a River North office, dismissing her Englewood space as a converted closet. Jasmine toured a 23rd floor suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and polished concrete floors. Its $10,000 monthly rent a leap she could now afford. Movers brought in sleek desks, a far cry from her secondhand finds, and she hired 10 new employees, coders, analysts, marketers, poached from Chicago's tech scene. The Triplets play area moved with them, a corner of the office filled with toys and laughter. Keith became a frequent visitor, his presence steadying. Over late-night strategy sessions, their partnership deepened into friendship, his respect for her vision unwavering. One evening as they reviewed projections, Keith's tone shifted. "Jasmine, I have a proposal. Not business, but personal." Her breath caught. At 58, Keith was twice her age, a father figure to the industry. "A partnership," he clarified, his voice gentle. "A marriage to secure the boys' future, merge our assets, give them a legal father who values them." Jasmine studied him, his gray eyes earnest. "People will talk," she said. "They always do," he shrugged. "What matters is what we build." Days later, in a quiet ceremony at his Lincoln Park penthouse, they exchanged simple vows, the Triplets in tiny tuxedos stealing the show. Keith adopted Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, his signature on the papers a promise of stability. As Jasmine watched him lift Noah with a grandfatherly grin, she felt a weight lift. Not love in the romantic sense, but something solid, a foundation for her sons. Trinity Analytics wasn't just a company now. It was a legacy, poised to soar. The Willis Towers Grand Ballroom pulsed with the energy of Chicago's elite, a glittering sea of tailored suits and clinking champagne flutes under the chandeliers. The Urban Business Summit was the pinnacle of financial power, where CEOs and investors shaped the city's economic future. Henry Sterling, his golden hair catching the light, navigated the crowd with practiced charm, his Hermes tie a bold statement against the strain etched into his face. At 36, he was still Boston's golden boy, but Sterling Financial Group teetered on the edge of collapse after a disastrous European expansion. 5 major clients had fled in the past quarter, and the board's whispers of a buyout were growing louder. Henry sipped bourbon, his smile tight as he deflected questions about his firm's troubles, unaware that the stage was set for a reckoning. Jasmine Carter Langley stood backstage, her crimson Dior suit a vivid contrast to her dark skin, her natural curls styled into a regal crown. At 33, she was no longer the desperate woman Henry had discarded. She was the CEO of Trinity Analytics, a $2 billion empire built from the ashes of his rejection. Her triplets, Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, stood beside her, their miniature suits tailored to perfection, their brown eyes wide with excitement. Keith Langley, her husband and partner, adjusted Levi's bow tie, his silver hair glinting as he offered a reassuring nod. Jasmine's heart raced, not with fear, but with purpose. Today, she would announce Trinity Analytics' acquisition of Sterling Financial, a move that would rewrite her story and Henry's in front of the world's most powerful. The MC's voice cut through the hum of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jasmine Carter Langley, CEO of Trinity Analytics, valued at $2 billion. The crowd hushed as Jasmine strode onto the stage, her heels clicking with authority, the triplets and Keith following. Gasps rippled through the audience as the boys, unmistakably Henry's with their sharp cheekbones, stood proudly beside her. Henry, seated in the front row, froze, his bourbon glass trembling in his hand. Jasmine's gaze locked onto his, her voice clear and resonant. "Trinity Analytics is thrilled to announce our acquisition of Sterling Financial Group, expanding our portfolio into wealth management." The room erupted in applause, but Henry's world imploded, his face draining of color as he recognized his sons for the first time. Jasmine's words cut deeper than any blade. "Chicago taught me that value lies in integrity, not lineage," she said, her eyes never leaving Henry's. "My sons, Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, are shareholders in the company we've acquired, a legacy built from hard work and vision." The triplets waved to the crowd, their confidence startling for 5-year-olds, and curious glances darted toward Henry, whispers spreading like wildfire. The resemblance was undeniable, and the implications explosive. Henry's bourbon slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor, a jagged echo of his shattered pride. The board had kept the buyer's identity hidden behind NDAs, and now the truth hit him like a freight train. The woman he'd deemed never enough now owned his family's legacy. The MC summoned Henry to the stage for the formal transition. His legs felt leaden, each step toward the platform a march to his gallows. Jasmine extended her hand, her expression a mask of professionalism, but her grip was firm, unyielding. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice cool for the cameras, "Trinity Analytics values your experience and hopes you'll stay on during the transition." Henry's throat tightened, memories of their past flooding back. Nights in his penthouse, her laughter, the life he'd thrown away. "Jasmine, he began, his voice low, but she cut him off. "Ms. Carter Langley," she corrected, her polite smile sharp as a blade. "Or Dr. Carter Langley, given my PhD from Harvard." Camera flashes exploded, capturing the moment as Keith detailed the acquisition, his calm authority a stark contrast to Henry's unraveling composure. As the event shifted to a cocktail reception, Henry cornered Jasmine near the bar, his voice a desperate hiss. "You planned this. You knew I'd be here." Jasmine accepted a champagne flute from a waiter, her demeanor unshaken. "Not everything revolves around you, Henry. I didn't plan your company's collapse. That was your mismanagement." Her words were calm but lethal, each one a mirror to his failures. "Those boys," he pressed, his eyes flicking to the triplets playing nearby with Keith. "They're mine." Jasmine's gaze hardened. "They have a father, Keith Langley, who adopted them when we married. You called them a burden, remember? I kept your check, uncashed, as a reminder of who you are." Henry flinched, the weight of his own words crushing him. "I have rights," he insisted weakly. Jasmine took a sip of champagne, her eyes never wavering. "Rights? You told me to disappear. I have every word recorded." A CNBC reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Ms. Carter Langley, a statement on the acquisition?" Jasmine turned, her smile professional. "Sterling Financial has a legacy we'll honor, but change is necessary. Mr. Sterling will consult, reporting to our junior executive committee." The reporter raised an eyebrow. "Junior committee?" Jasmine's eyes gleamed. "Our innovative program introduces young talent to corporate leadership. My sons will oversee projects, with supervision, of course." Henry paled, realizing he'd report to the children he'd rejected. As the reporter moved away, Jasmine leaned closer. "Their office hours are Thursdays, 4 to 5. They're curious about failed European expansions. A cautionary tale." Before he could respond, she glided away, greeting investors with a grace that left Henry stranded in a sea of pitying glances. The ballroom, once his domain, now mocked him. His fiancée, Abigail Wentworth, would soon learn of the triplets from the media storm brewing. His mother's disapproval loomed, her voice already ringing in his mind. Jasmine hadn't sought revenge. She'd simply let his choices unravel him publicly. As she stood with Keith and the boys, her crimson suit a beacon of power, Henry saw not just the woman he'd betrayed, but the empire she'd built without him. The summit, meant to be his stage, had become hers and the world was watching. The Fairmont Hotel's ballroom glittered under a constellation of chandeliers, its opulence a fitting stage for the Women in Leadership Awards, where Chicago's elite gathered to honor the city's most powerful female executives. Jasmine Carter Langley stood at the center of it all, a vision in a gold Oscar de la Renta gown that shimmered with every movement, transforming her into a living emblem of success. At 33, she was no longer the broken woman who'd slept on Boston's South Station benches. She was the CEO of Trinity Analytics, a $2 billion empire that had just acquired Sterling Financial Group. Her triplets, Isaiah, Noah, and Levi, sat at the main table, their child-sized tuxedos impeccable, their brown eyes sparkling with pride. Keith Langley, her husband and partner, sat beside them, his silver hair and calm authority a quiet anchor. The room buzzed with anticipation, but for Jasmine, this moment was more than an award. It was a coronation, a final severing of the chains Henry Sterling had tried to bind her with. Henry sat at a distant table near the kitchen doors, his Brooks Brothers tie a downgrade from the Hermes he once wore, his presence mandated by his new role as a consultant for Trinity Analytics. The past 6 months had been a slow unraveling. His engagement to Abigail Wentworth shattered when she learned of the triplets via a viral New York Post headline, "Wall Street Drama, CEO buys company of man who abandoned her pregnant with triplets." Abigail's Instagram post announcing the end of their engagement had garnered thousands of comments, her diamond ring conspicuously absent. Henry's mother, Barbara, had left voicemails laced with fury, demanding to meet her grandchildren. Now, as he adjusted his tie, the weight of his public fall pressed down, the ballroom's elegance a stark contrast to his diminished status. The master of ceremonies took the podium, her voice cutting through the clinking of glasses. "Tonight, we celebrate a visionary who redefined digital marketing while raising triplets as a single mother. Please welcome Jasmine Carter Langley, Businesswoman of the Year." The room erupted in applause as Jasmine rose, her gown catching the light like molten gold. The triplets clapped with unrestrained joy, their fluency in Mandarin and advanced math skills, already at a second-grade level, making them the darlings of the night. Henry joined the ovation, his hands moving mechanically, the sound hollow against the roaring crowd. Jasmine's presence commanded the room, her natural curls styled in an elegant updo, a far cry from the straightened hair she'd once worn to fit corporate molds. Standing at the podium, her crystal award gleaming, Jasmine surveyed the audience with a confidence earned through years of struggle. "5 years ago," she began, her voice clear and resonant, "a man told me that a black woman from the South Side and her 3 sons would never belong in places like this." Her gaze found Henry, pinning him to his seat. Henry Sterling learned that character trumps privilege, that integrity outweighs lineage. The crowd stirred, heads turning toward Henry, who felt heat rising in his face, shame burning through his composure. "Today," Jasmine continued, "my sons are shareholders in the company we acquired, a $2 billion empire built from resilience." The triplets beamed and whispers spread, the story of Henry's betrayal, now a legend in business circles. Jasmine's tone softened, but her words carried weight. "This isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. I built Trinity Analytics to show my sons their worth, to teach them to value people by their actions, not their skin or bank accounts." The room rose in a standing ovation, the applause a thunderous affirmation of her triumph. Henry stood too, intending to slip out, but Jasmine's next words froze him. "Henry Sterling discovered that those deemed not enough can decide your fate." The crowd's gaze pinned him, a mix of curiosity and pity as he stood paralyzed between tables. Her speech wasn't a vendetta, it was a mirror, reflecting his choices at him. As Jasmine descended the stage, business leaders lined up to congratulate her, their admiration genuine. Keith guided the triplets, who charmed executives with their poise, answering questions in Mandarin with startling ease. Henry watched from afar, his heart heavy with the magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just a company, but a family and the chance to be a better man. Gathering his courage, he approached their table, his voice low. "Congratulations, Jasmine," he said, the words inadequate against their history. "Thank you, Henry," she replied, her tone neutral, her eyes unreadable. Isaiah, his dimpled cheek a mirror of Henry's, looked up. "Are you the man from Mommy's story?" he asked, his innocence cutting deeper than any accusation. Noah, ever perceptive, added, "The one who said Mommy wasn't enough?" Henry's throat constricted, words failing him. Keith stepped in, his voice gentle but firm. "Boys, time to say goodnight." As the family gathered their belongings, Henry spoke quickly. "Jasmine, your speech. Thank you for not destroying me completely." Jasmine's expression remained steady. "Destruction was never my goal, Henry. Construction was." He gestured toward the boys. "Is there any chance someday?" She cut him off, her voice calm but resolute. "6 months ago, I told you to prove you've changed. Have you?" Henry nodded, his voice earnest. "I'm mentoring interns, learning Mandarin, working on your diversity initiative." A flicker of approval crossed her face. "Keep going. If the boys want to know you, we'll consider it, on their terms." Keith ushered the family toward the exit, his hand steady on Levi's shoulder. "Good night, Mr. Sterling," he said, his tone final. Henry watched them leave, the triplets' small hands held by the parents who'd chosen them unconditionally. Outside in the back of their town car, Jasmine settled with Isaiah half asleep in her lap, Noah and Levi dozing in the back seat. Chicago's skyline glittered beyond the window, a testament to her journey. "You okay?" Keith asked, noting her pensive gaze. "I'm free," Jasmine replied, her voice soft but certain. The pain of Henry's rejection, the weight of his words had dissolved. She'd built a legacy not for vengeance, but for liberation. For herself, her sons, and every soul deemed not enough by a world blind to their value. Thank you for joining Jasmine Carter Langley's incredible journey from betrayal to triumph, a story of resilience that proves no one can define your worth but you. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What inspired you most about Jasmine's rise? Drop a comment below, share how her story resonates with you, and subscribe to our channel to catch more tales of grit and glory. Your support fuels these narratives, and we can't wait to bring you the next one. See you soon for another story that'll spark your fire.